and welcome back to the Bundesliga Show, brought to you by Over the Bar and, of course, in partnership with Bundesliga Boxes. They are a mystery German football shirt provider that provides authentic T-shirts from around the German national leagues. Some fantastic shirts on offer. If you haven't seen them before or seen me and Mark sporting them, make sure you check them out. They're on Twitter, or go check them out on their new website. I'm not sporting one this evening, but there's a very good chance you can get Dortmund tops in their packages. They've got everything. So make sure you do check them out. Brilliant partnership that we're working with them this year. As you'll have noticed, the man to my right this evening is not Mark. So very happy to be joined by Adam Smith. Kind of a star, almost a guest host these days. Smith has helped out on a good few shows now. So yeah, Smith stepped in for Mark, who's again on his jollies. So yeah, Smithy, thank you very much for stepping in.
Pleasure.
Yeah, we'll be cracking on with some Bundesliga action. Not only have we got Smithy on board tonight, we've got our first proper guest of the season, certainly of the review shows. So very excited to welcome in John, who's a Freiburg fan and tactician. So we'll get John in a moment. But let's crack on straight away then. Of course, no Mark, so no Mark's mystery anagram this evening. So we'll move that on to next week when we'll go through the results of that. I think Smithy's cat agrees with everything that's going on at the moment as well.
Certainly does.
Perfect. So just looking at the scores on the doors from the weekend. So we start off with Leverkusen's thrilling defeat in the end, a 7-goal thriller with Dortmund losing 4-3 there. Union 0, Augsburg 0 in a stalemate. Also Saturday afternoon saw Freiburg drawing with FC Cologne, which we'll be covering in detail with John shortly. Hoffenheim lost at home to Mainz, a bit of a shock there. Fürth losing at home to the perfect still Wolfsburg. RB got taught a lesson by champions Bayern 4-1 there at the Red Bull Leipzig Stadium. Sunday's games, 1-1 draw between Frankfurt and Stuttgart, entertaining game there. Bochum losing at home to Hertha 3-1. Big win there for Hertha, and Gladbach finishing off the weekend with a 3-1 home win of Bielefeld. So that's the scores on the door. So let's bring in our guest then for this week. So we've got John McKenzie of Analytics FC. So yeah, John's head of content for Analytics FC. So you check them out on Twitter first and foremost. And he also runs the Twitter page, What a Strike. So that is a Twitter page that covers the stats and tactical analysis of Freiburg. So let's bring him in now. Evening, John. Thanks very much for joining us.
Hey guys, it's great to be here. Hope you're both doing well.
Yeah, top man. Thanks very much for coming on this evening as we're recording on the Sunday after the weekend's Bundesliga action. So what we'll do is, John, we'll crack on with our featured four analysis and start with your team. So Freiburg 1, FC Cologne 1. So John, first and foremost, just your basic overall feelings about the result on a basic level before we go into anything else like that.
Yeah, it's a shame that this is the weekend that I come on to talk about Freiburg, really, because this is probably the most disappointing result that they've had so far this season. Obviously, they've had some good results. They've managed to beat Stuttgart and also Dortmund, which is a really good result for Freiburg. And they had a bit more of a disappointing opening draw to the season to Bielefeld as well. Freiburg are an interesting team because I think this shows it as well. The fact that the two draws that they've got have been against the teams that you might actually expect them to maybe ease past without any trouble. Obviously, Köln a little bit better this season than they have been in the last few seasons. So I think that needs to be caveated. But this was a pretty poor game from Freiburg in the end, and they were well on their way towards a 1-0 defeat, which I think largely would have been deserved in many respects. They were lucky that Köln ended up having a red card in the 75th minute which just gave them that little bit of impetus to get forward a little bit more. And in the end, it was an own goal that did it for them. So it wasn't even a convincing goal at that. But I think the thing for Freiburg is at the moment they're in the heady heights of the Bundesliga, and every season for Freiburg is basically we need to stay up, and so results like this are very welcome, I think, for most Freiburg fans, because yes, it would be lovely for them to get into Europe again, which has happened within the last 5 years. But first and foremost, it's all about making sure you get enough points on the board to avoid going into the relegation spaces, and that's what they're very much doing at the moment. So yeah, interesting one. One of those games where you kind of think, oh, it would have been great to pick the points up that you need, but actually, I think there's a sense in which Freiburg actually benefit from playing against the teams who come out against them, rather than the teams who are maybe going to be a little bit stodgier defensively. And I think the 2 draws they've had so far have sort of been testament to that. They haven't looked as creative when teams are happier to sit in against them. I noticed that the possession stats are, I guess, fairly. There's a fair parity, but Freiburg did have the higher possession stats against Köln, and I think in general they tend to fare better when they maybe give a little bit of the possession up, and then they're a counter-attacking side. So that'll be an interesting thing to keep an eye on as the season goes on. So yeah, good result really. Disappointing game, but everything's looking pretty good for Freiburg this season.
Good stuff. Yeah, I think what I've certainly seen from Freiburg this season is that where possible, they've made positive starts to the first half. So obviously, the 1 week that we get you on, John, obviously it is the one game where they struggled in the first half. I think it's fair to say FC Cologne really were on the front foot for large proportions of it. And I think you quite rightly say the game pretty much swung on the red card. Really stupid bit of playing kind. I don't know what he's been getting involved in that.
Very comical.
Yeah, a bit on a yellow card as well. So that was his second booking, of course. And then Freiburg, made the most of it. So as we've got you on the show, John, and, with your kind of tactical head on, do you think there's anything different that Freiburg could have done before, obviously, you making the most of the man advantage and then pushing forward where eventually the goal came from it's an own goal, and it's probably harsh to say it's a bit of a bad own goal because I think he just gets his feet in the muddle, and obviously the ball deflects off. But yeah, in general, is there much Freiburg hadn't done this weekend that they've done in the first 3 games that you spotted, John?
Yeah, I think for me, the interesting thing about this game is that Köln play a 4-4-2 diamond, which we've actually seen quite a bit of in the Bundesliga this season. And obviously Dortmund have been playing that formation, and it's a funny formation, and it's one which I'm never quite certain about, because obviously the big thing about it is narrowness. So yeah, when you play with that diamond, you tend to largely use it, I think, as a counter-pressing tactic, so that when you play the ball forward and the second ball comes out, you can have players around the ball to quickly pounce on it and try and create a counter-attack from that situation. That means it's quite narrow, and usually the best way of playing against that is to try and move the ball from side to side to create space on either side. On the opposite side, move the ball across. And it surprised me a little bit because Freiburg are usually a very good team for doing that sort of thing. They obviously have Vincenzo Grifo, who's one of the stars of the team, plays on one wing. Yeah. They had Roland Schalai on the other wing, both players who are going to cause problems from wide areas. They also have Woo Young Jong, who's playing as a sort of second striker at the moment, but is a player who can drift into those wide spaces as well. And I think it was just disappointing for me in the first half in particular that they just didn't seem to be making the most of that sort of width issue. I would have liked to have seen them trying to maybe move the ball one side to the other and make a little bit more of that. And actually in the second half, I think they were much better in the second half. And one of the things I noticed was that Nico Schlotterbeck, who's the left-sided centre-back in that back four as it stands, was playing really wide. They were almost going to a back three in possession, and Schlotterbeck was basically sitting in the left-back area. Christian Günther was pushing down the wing, and we were seeing Schlotterbeck carry the ball into really advanced areas, and at times even getting into the box, and it made a huge difference because you're then sort of utilising the fact that there's a narrowness there, but you're also bringing an extra player into that space that opens out in the wide areas. And Nico Schlotterbeck, what a player, really exciting player to see coming through. It's great to see him getting picked by the Meisterschaft in the last international break. So yeah, there's lots of fun players at Freiburg at the moment, and they've definitely got enough players to cause problems. I just sometimes think that Christian Streich is a little bit too nervous about being gung-ho, so it's always sort of safety first, and sometimes in these games it means then you sort of get a little bit frustrated that there isn't that like ball progression that you could get quicker. So playing someone like Lukas Höhler up front, who is and Wu Yong Zhong for that matter, both really, really good off the ball. We're going to chase the ball around all day long. But sometimes you just sort of want there to be one of those two strikers being someone who's going to be a little bit more efficient. He's just going to cause problems to the opposition defence, put them under pressure in quick situations, and just see if you can nick the goal. And I think that's something else that maybe could have been done differently. Maybe bringing on Emedin Demirovic, who had a great season last season but seems to have fallen out of favour a little bit this season. Bringing him on a bit earlier maybe would have made a bit of a difference as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you allude to there with regards to the tactics in the second half, using Schlotterbeck almost as a fullback and being able to push the fullbacks on a lot higher up the pitch, definitely would have gone in the favour of Freiburg, given the fact that FC Cologne's success so far this season has been using their width and playing it into the likes of Uth and Modeste up front, which has been a bit of an unlikely partnership this season. Because if you said that those two would have been thriving in the Bundesliga based on their recent past, it would have been a bit of a shock. So effectively, when Freiburg did that, they were able to maybe condense Cologne a bit more and flip reverse things onto them and be much more of a threat. Obviously, we saw some good saves actually by Timo Horn in net to keep things what looked like it was going to be a narrow win for Cologne, but Freiburg's persistence eventually paid off. So I think it was on the face of it, probably fair to say a draw was about right. So looking ahead, John, with regards to Freiburg, you've already mentioned how the kind of season objective every season is to stay in the Bundesliga, given Freiburg's small transfer spends that we usually see. So what are your thoughts for the rest of the season? Have your expectations changed slightly based on the positive start, or is it still very much get to a certain amount of points and go from there?
Yeah, I'm maybe a little bit more circumspect than most fans, so I'm always going to be a little bit careful about jumping into hasty conclusions based on 4 games. I'm just looking at the FBref numbers at the moment, and Freiburg are 5th in the table. But if you look at their expected goal difference, they've actually conceded more goals or conceded more XG than they've created. For those people who don't know what expected goals is, it's just a way of looking at the chance qualities that are created and trying to work out the likelihood of the chances that have been created going in. So Freiburg are currently on 3.6 goals for, and according to XG, they've actually scored 6 goals. So they're already scoring way more than you might expect. And then in terms of goals against, they're on 4 XG against, and they have conceded 4 XG. So they're running a little bit rich in attack and finishing about where you would expect them to be defensively. If you look at the teams above them, so you've got Mainz, Dortmund, Bayern, and Wolfsburg. All of those teams are well in advance of their expected goal difference. So Mainz are plus 2.5, Dortmund are plus 4.4, Bayern are plus 5, and Wolfsburg are plus 3.6. So if you look at the underlying numbers, it suggests that this is a fairly unsustainable rate for Freiburg to remain in that sort of position, which is fine. I don't expect them to be finishing in European places really, but it's nice having that bedrock to sort of kick off the season and have the points on the board, however lucky they are coming to you. It's just nice to have that bedrock. You don't want to get into the sort of situation that Hertha Berlin have been in the last couple of seasons, and they've sort of been in that situation until the game today. You don't want to get into that sort of state of affairs where you are worrying a little bit about relegation. It's the same thing happened with Werder Bremen for so many seasons before they went down. So for me, I don't care how the points come, as long as they're there and we're well above the relegation zone. It's just a case, I think, of maybe picking up a few issues that we've seen along the way in terms of the tactical side of things, and getting that attack a little bit more dangerous. The defense looks pretty good. I don't think I've ever seen a better Freiburg defense under my time supporting. So that's about 5-6 years. The attack, I think we've got the players to do it, but I think there needs to be a little bit more coming there. And if Streich can sort that out, then I think they will be well worth the sort of top half of the table finish.
Good stuff. And before I just move on to ask you, John, a little bit about how you've got into the analytical side of things. It's easy for me to say. One question really that we've never had a Freiburg fan on the show before. Obviously, we're only into our second series of this, but really happy to have you on. So just wondering, not a lot of people maybe had, seen a lot of Freiburg because they don't get involved in mass transfers, and they keep a, squad, tighten it together, and they're very careful about what they do. And, even if you look at the Santa Maria kind of signing and how that maybe didn't work out. So with regards to how they approach transfers and how they'd obviously want to keep a hold of key players with the likes of Grifo and Demirovic, who, certainly last season, are they a club that, run well? Do they, just try and make sure that they keep on a steady plateau of making sure that they, are financially stable, especially in, these COVID times?
Yeah, definitely. I would describe Freiburg as a sort of selling club. There'll be a club who are happy to move players on if the right offer comes in. So you mentioned Baptiste Santamaria, who moved this summer. He was the record signing that Freiburg had made. I can't remember the exact figure because there's a little bit of argumentation about what it was, but they definitely made a positive return on him. So Santamaria came in from Angers in France. Spent a season at Freiburg and his family didn't really settle in the city, and so he decided he wanted to go back. He's moved back to Rennes recently, and it was just the whole process was just really professional. He went to the club and said, "I'm not happy here. I'm not settling in. I'd like to go back to France if that's possible." They said, "That's fine, as long as we can find a buyer, as long as we can find a replacement." Obviously, they ended up bringing in Maxi Eggenstein for a really good fee. I think it was €3 million or something like that. And obviously sold Santa Maria for profit as well. And so, on paper, that looks absolutely fine. There's been a few players who they've sold for fairly big money. If you look at their record signings versus their record sales, I think they made something like 20 million euro profit on the top 3 players that they spent money on and then sold on, which is a really good rate of return when you consider that Santa Maria was their record signing, and I think he was maybe about 10 million euros or 10 million pounds, one of the two. I don't have the figure to my on the top of my head, I'm afraid, but really, really good way of running a club. For me, it's a smart way of running the club. They have a manager in Christian Streich who is just a fantastic manager. He works with what he's got, gets on with it, gets them every season in the league, finishing way higher than their wage budget would suggest. They typically, I don't know if this has changed in recent years because wage numbers are always a little bit out of date by the time they actually come through, but they've typically been in the sort of bottom 3 or 4 in terms of the amount of money that they're spending on wages, and they're finishing mid-table most of the time. There was one relegation under Streich. They kept him and they came straight back up the season after. So it's just smart business. It's Freiburg, for people who don't know, is in the southwest of Germany. It's basically the Lake District of Germany is how I describe it. So you've got the Black Forest, the Schwarzwald, which was what their stadium was named after until recently. They're moving into a new stadium now, and it's a little bit sort of touristy. It's a little bit back and beyond. So I can see how someone like Santa Maria might turn up and not enjoy the place, but they have a lot of local players who they bring up through the ranks, who they then sell on for profit. So people like Matthias Ginter, Max Philipp, players like that. Leeds United, my English club, bought Robin Koch from them recently. So they're they're great at sort of bringing through local talent and bringing talent that's not recognised in Germany through. They also shop in markets outside the usual markets, so maybe backwater markets. So we mentioned Roland Schley, the winger, the Hungarian winger. He was brought in from a Cypriot team. So they are looking in sort of these backwater markets for value, and when he inevitably moves on, they will make profit on him as well. So it's just a really smart run club, which just accepts that they won't be able to keep players when they perform well. So you've got to just constantly be having that sort of turnover of good talent, and if you can do that, then it's all great.
Brilliant. That's really interesting. John. Yeah. Last question from me, certainly on Freiburg. It's basically just how you've ended up being a fan and obviously being associated with Freiburg and obviously having the Twitter page and things like that. Yeah,
it's a funny story actually, because when I started following the Bundesliga, I did it really as a professional thing. I was covering football as a football writer, and the advice always had been, make sure that you've got like another league outside of the English leagues that you sort of have an expertise in. And I'd chosen Germany because I love German culture. I was learning German at the time as well. It just sort of made sense, and I really enjoyed German football. But when I was first covering the league, I sort of had a soft spot for Gladbach, and sort of considered myself a sort of semi-Gladbach fan. But my girlfriend at the time is a big Liverpool fan. She was my girlfriend at the time. We'd been watching a lot of football. It was the season when RB Leipzig had just come up, and they played that really exciting football under Ralf Hasenhüttl. And she'd fallen in love with Naby Keita and was desperate to see Naby Keita play in the flesh. So we worked out that I had a friend in Freiburg who had always said, you should come over and I'll sort you out tickets to a game if you come over. And so we worked out that it was that the game against RB Leipzig sort of favourably fell on the same at a time when we could make it, and we ended up going across, watching this game, had a great time in Freiburg, the city, which sort of peaked with us going to the game, and in the end, Freiburg won 2-1 against RB Leipzig, which was a ridiculously good result for them in the context, because that was the season where RB Leipzig basically nearly won I think around Christmas time they were sort of really pushing for the title. They fell away obviously at the end. It was a great game, and Naby Keita didn't even show up because he was injured. But from that point on, that was me. I just loved the experience of going to the game, experiencing how tight-knit the football community was. I mean, Freiburg is a town of 200,000 people, and the stadium's seats or stands 20,000 people. So 1 in 10 people. And it's in the middle of nowhere. So it's not like people are traveling to the games from a long way around. This is predominantly the people in the city going along to the game. 1 in 10 people from the city pretty much there. And so as a result of that, everyone in the city cares about what's going on in the football club because it impacts them in some way. So it was great, sort of that side of things. It was great being able to stand in the stadium, drink beer, and just enjoy the fan culture. After the game, the ultras basically anoint one of the players as a man of the match, and he goes into the stand and sings songs through the loudspeaker, and they all dance around. Nice. That's great fun as well. And also just the stadium, it's a small stadium, so the opposition team bus was just parked to the back, and you could see all the players just getting in it, and you're all milling around just with the players going through it, and the Freiburg players themselves just very, very down to earth guys, because a lot of them, they're not big stars in Germany, and so again, you're milling around afterwards, drinking beers, chatting to people, and these players just walk through. You get into their cars, and people chat to them, and it's just a really, really nice atmosphere. So from that point on, I was just hooked.
A strong sell on Freiburg. Me and Rory, after the last show I jumped on, we're talking about trying to get out to Germany at some point this year or next for a game, and obviously the obvious ones are Munich, Dortmund, but it sounds like Freiburg's going to have to be on the list then.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. The only problem is that they have got a new stadium now, so that what they're calling now is the Dreisam Stadium, which is the sort of iconic stadium in the middle of the Black Forest. You can see the forest behind it from goal kicks and stuff. Is now being replaced by a more modern Stadium, which is on the other side of town. They are going to keep the Dreisam Stadium for the women's team and the 23s team, so that it will still be in action. But a big part of the thrill for me was just being in such an iconic stadium where you're watching over the game, and to your right, to your left, you can see the Black Forest up the hill, and it's just a really great experience. So yeah, well worth a visit, but a little bit out of the way, unfortunately, for a sort of big Bundesliga weekend.
Very true. Brilliant stuff, John. That's been great to listen to you about Freiburg and really listening more about a club that we wanted to cover more. So that's brilliant. So what we'll do is we'll just quickly move on to the remaining 3 of our featured 4 games. So next up was, arguably, you've got to say the best game of the weekend, probably across Europe, I think it's fair to say. So Leverkusen 3, Dortmund 4. Smithy, I'll throw it over to you. Do you want to just ask John a little bit about what he thought about the game and a few of the key points? Because, there certainly was a fair few of them.
Yeah, certainly. Ebbed and flowed. Was really, as a neutral, really, really interesting to dive into it and watch that one. I caught the highlights, and I think the highlights were nearly 20 minutes. So obviously, plenty going on. For a couple of points for me, I thought Bellingham looked really good again. Obviously, had his goal disallowed, which is a shame. But really interesting. Some cracking goals. Haaland. I think Haaland. They said that was only his second ever header that he'd scored for Dortmund, or something crazy. Well, I thought, we would have got a few more than that, because he is, decent sized chap. But obviously on the score sheet again. And what about that free kick from was it Guerrero? Yeah. Free kick at the end, just unbelievable. But yeah, do you think that was a fair result? 4-3 Dortmund.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because I think when you look at what happened right at the end of that game, when they get the sort of free kick and then a penalty, which I think you would feel a little bit put out by if you were a fan of any team that conceded that penalty. It did feel a little bit like Dortmund got away with it. Again, looking at the underlying numbers, it does seem as though they didn't get away with it, but they did create the chances to score goals, and maybe Leverkusen scored a few low chance or low probability efforts. But yeah, for me, this was a game of exciting youngsters, right? We've got Florian Wirtz, who's just incredible to watch, and it feels like he's been around forever, right? And he's still ridiculously young. And then Jamal Musiala, who came on and I just thought looked excellent in the game. Dortmund are funny, aren't they? Because you never really know what you're going to get with them, but you do know that there will be exciting youngsters on that team. And there was just that. Yeah, it's so great watching them play. And I've just talked about youngsters, but that Julian Brandt goal. My goodness, it was great as well. It's just so many good goals in this fixture. It was just such an open game, wasn't it? It didn't feel particularly tactical. It just sort of felt like it was 2 teams slugging it out against each other, and you're just getting goal after goal, and it went 1-0, 2-1, 3-2, 4-3. It just went all the way, just sort of flipping backwards and forwards. So yeah, really, really enjoyable game. But it's hard to make anything of it in terms of like it being so open.
Yeah, I was literally about to say that it's probably got to be like a statistician's nightmare or a tactician's nightmare. Like it's just pure carnage, isn't it? Obviously, yeah, Florian Wirtz getting things off the mark for Leverkusen, who started really quickly, and obviously they kept on going into the lead, which I thought, obviously based on form, was like, that seems right. Dortmund obviously have shown vulnerabilities at the back. Them conceding goals is no new thing, but I don't know if it's an inbuilt thing or if they're just led so well by Haaland, who has this inner belief that if he's involved in a game, they have the chance of winning. But to keep on coming back throughout that game 3 times, different times, was incredibly impressive. And as you said, a game just filled with individual quality. The free kick, obviously Haaland's header, everything about that. So, John, just briefly, are you quite impressed with just, Dortmund's mentality just not to be beaten, given the fact that they're such a hard team to predict at the moment?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because with Marco Rosa and René Maric in charge, you sort of think that they're going to be like a hyper cerebral team. Right? It feels as though you will watch those games and sort of see tactical ideas being played out. But it very much looks as though at the moment they are going with that 4-4-2 diamond that we've talked about, and they haven't been able to do that with the sorts of fullbacks that they maybe wanted to, which I think can limit you a lot. And so it does feel as though everything just ends up being quite central. Well, I should say that yesterday they did start in a 4-2-3-1, I think, and they did bring on Donald Malin later on, didn't they? And then went into that formation. But it does seem as though they are just they just really want to go super direct, and they're just sort of relying on the fact that when you've got players like the players that they've got on the field, like particularly Haaland, like you've said, the ability for him to just generate chances out of seemingly nowhere. That probably is quite a good way of going about it. And yeah, looking at the underlying numbers, they did restrict Leverkusen to low probability chances, and they did generate some high probability chances themselves. So it's clearly on paper working. And we talked before about the underlying numbers, and they're well worth their place in the Champions League spots at the moment. So maybe Maric and Rosa are doing the right thing as things stand.
Very much so. So yeah, very positive result for them. I'll just quickly throw out a question to you both, actually, just for your thoughts on it. Dortmund, of course, have been, generally speaking, the next best team to Leverkusen, of course, with the exception of RB Leipzig, who have pushed them quite far. But in terms of this season, do either of you see them, even remotely pushing this Bayern side? So throw it over to Smithy first, and then over to you, John.
I think they're going to have to shore it up at the back a little bit. You rarely see Bayern Munich, I think, conceding 2, 3, 4 goals a game. Obviously, if they're going to be scoring 4 or 5 goals every game, then they can do. But I don't think that's going to happen every week. I'll be interested to see whether the business that they have done is going to be enough to make up for Sancho, losing Sancho. Because obviously, still a very young player, but such a big player for them over the last couple of years in terms of the amount of contributions to goals. Yeah, I'd be interested to see how that plays out. To be honest, I don't think they're going to challenge Bayern. And I think if they lose Haaland at some point, I don't know whether he signed new contracts or, whether he's going to go next year. But I think they could be in trouble if he does decide to go in the next year to 2 years.
Yeah, all very good points, John.
Yeah, look, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because I think in the last few seasons we've always sort of been like, well, if Bayern were pushed hard enough by Dortmund, where we'd have seen a title challenge, or however people want to put it. But the fact of the matter is, there's just such a massive financial disparity between Dortmund and Bayern that I think it's really unfair that a lot of managers, so particularly Lucien Favre, I think was tarred with this brush, where people would say he doesn't have the mentality to coach Dortmund. You need to have a passionate coach in charge of Dortmund who's going to get, more out of them just by sort of geeing them along. This is interesting because we obviously had a few Bayern coaches who maybe weren't quite up to scratch. I'm thinking particularly of Kovac here, and when you get someone like Kovac who never really performed well at Bayern, and still no one could overtake him after what was probably the worst the first season in their sort of recent history, it does sort of raise questions about what it would look like for a team to actually challenge at the very top. But I think this time around is going to be fascinating because I've already mentioned that I have a huge amount of time for Marco Rosa and René Maric, his assistant. I also have a huge amount of time for Julian Nagelsmann. So what we're going to see here is we're sort of maybe not a level playing field in terms of the coaches, but what we've got is two smart coaches with good quality players under them. And I think if we get to the end of the season and we see that there still is that gap between Bayern and Dortmund, then you sort of raise the question, like, what would it take to overcome that gap? Like, what is it that is eventually going to give? Is it just a case again of having to wait for another Niko Kovac to end up at Bayern for whatever reason and hope that Dortmund have a good coach at that point? Obviously, Bayern turned over RB Leipzig, as we're going to talk about. And RB Leipzig have been as close to a challenger to Bayern in recent years as well. So what does that say? I thought maybe Bayern were a bit lucky getting a penalty in that one, but we will go on to talk about that. But like, it does just feel as though the chips always fall for Bayern. They have such an incredible team that to actually overtake them is going to require a huge amount of, I think, good performances, but also a little bit of luck too. So. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, we're better placed to kind of mention what is supposed to have been dubbed the title, well, not title deciding game, but an early look into these two teams that should be well up there this season. Obviously, ending up 4-1 to the champions. Obviously, the returning Julian Nagelsmann, the returning Upamecano, and the returning Marcel Sabitzer as well. So obviously, we've kind of talked a little bit about how Bayern, this juggernaut of a team. There's obviously plenty of chat in the Bundesliga amongst fans and pundits alike about how, Bayern do their business. RB Leipzig last season were the second best team in the league according to the league standings, and they've obviously lost their young budding head coach, their best central defender, and their captain to that team. So with all that in mind, it reinforces Bayern and it weakens the second place team. So that's maybe a discussion for another day or later on this show. But with regards to the game, John, what did you make of it first of all, and was it a comfortable victory in the end?
I have to admit, before we start off, I had a massive brain freeze, didn't I? Because I talked about Jamal Musiala for Dortmund and he's played for Bayern. So yeah, huge apologies for that. It's been a long day for me, but this was a really interesting game for me because I thought that there was that early penalty, which sort of came out of nowhere, with Kevin Campbell sort of shepherding the ball out and it hitting his arm, and it felt a little bit unjust insofar as it didn't really feel as though Bayern necessarily deserved to go in leading at the half, and I wonder what sort of impact that kind of thing has on a team psychologically. If you know that you can't make any mistakes against a team like Bayern, and then you make just a completely basic mistake and end up going in 1-0 down essentially because of that mistake, it must be a psychological blow because it's going to be hard enough to sort of get a goal, get a lead, and hold on to it. So for me, that was the sort of defining moment of the game. Okay, yeah, maybe it's not quite so simple as that, but I did think that it was maybe unfortunate that we didn't really get a level playing field game off the back of that. It was always going to be RB Leipzig. I think the penalty was fairly early on. It was a 12th minute, I think. Yeah. And when you're chasing a game, you obviously leave yourself open at the back, and obviously in the end, Bayern ground, and that when they have players like Jamal Musiala, as I've mentioned, I was really impressed with this weekend. Yeah. They've got players like Leroy Sané as well, players who can just sort of pick you off on the break. So if you're going forward trying to get that equaliser, then yeah, you're in a situation where you are going to be picked off. Players that stood out for me I'll say for RB Leipzig, because I think it's easy to focus on the winners. But Mohamed Simakan, I thought, had a great game. With a thankless task, right? When you're up against those Bayern forwards, I thought he looked really great. And again, it just seems as though RB Leipzig just do good business. It's sort of like a Freiburg, but at the other end of the table, right, where they're selling our players on for millions and then bringing in the next big talent as well. I thought Joško Gvardiol as well, when he came on, looked really good. The centre back turned left back for them at the moment. Another player who they just seem to pick all of the smart signings, and they turn out good. So no doubt we will see a couple of those players moved on maybe next season or the season after. But yeah, I thought this was it was promised to be a good game, and it was maybe a little bit let down by the penalty.
Yeah, it's a bit of a psychological blow, like you said. Bayern have just got this habit of scoring at the right time, whether it's just before the half or early on in games. Obviously, it proved to be the case. The substitution of Musiala, obviously losing Gnabry to injury, but then being able to bring on the caliber of player that he is, obviously, it's game changing in that regard. And then RB, get a bit of a sniff through that worldly of a goal through Lima. Great hit that, giving Neuer no chance. But unfortunately, from there on in, Bayern were actually clever enough just to manage the game, and then obviously they picked things off quite well in the end. Smithy, any other players that you picked up from that game, maybe on the Bayern side? Obviously, probably some obvious candidates, I presume.
Yeah, no, I was really impressed with the 18-year-old when he came on. Just thought it was really, really good, really exciting. It just seems like, I know you've obviously said it before, but as a neutral who doesn't always keep massively up to date with it, they've just got so much young talent across the Bundesliga. It's really exciting. And it seems like they give them all a chance to actually play as well, rather than just, a couple of minutes here and there. They actually look to bring them through. But yeah, that absolute wonder goal at the end there. That's by far my goal of the week, I think. It's just unfortunate they'd already shipped 3 or 4 before it went in.
Yeah, absolutely. Not worth really covering it too much more. Bayern looking very imperious right now. So, yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on things as they go on. Right, last game of the weekend, for our featured 4 anyway, that we're going to cover is the game on Sunday. Bochum 1, Hertha Berlin 3. So first points on the board for Hertha Berlin. Very, very important for them against, at the moment, relegation rivals Bochum, who are still sitting in 13th place, but obviously starting to be pulled in the wrong direction now. John, I know obviously you're at the football today, so obviously weren't really able to keep an eye on things with regards to this game. But were you expecting more from Hertha Berlin in the first 3 games, certainly, in terms of this season? I mean, me and Mark tipped them to have a much more improved season, but obviously they've got off the mark today, and they've looked a bit better with some of the players that have come in terms of their transfers. But prior to that, what were your thoughts on them?
Yeah, I mean, it was ridiculous last season that they were even anywhere in with a shout of relegation in terms of what the squad that they've got. And then they spent a huge amount of money anyway. And it's just remarkable that club can be so badly managed and run in general. Same this season, I think, is there's still that vestige there of things that you just kind of think, how is this club going through this? Like they should be one of the biggest clubs in German football. They shouldn't be fighting relegation here. They've spent enough money. They've got enough good talent on their books that they should be at least pushing at the top. Beating Bochum 3-1. Is that a good indication of where they're at? Maybe it's what they need, but they certainly need to be away from the bottom of the table on just the quality of player and the quality of club and facilities that they have. So I think we'll probably see them maybe a little bit more like mid-table this season. But I don't really understand it. I don't know if you guys have got any ideas about why things have gone so badly wrong for them in recent years. I think they almost got away with it last season because Schalke were even worse. So it would be interesting to see how Hertha sort of pull themselves up again.
Yeah, I think, certainly for me, a lot of it goes maybe towards the head coach. Obviously, Dardai, very kind of emotional character, maybe an emotional kind of appointment. Just with regards to last season, he did the job that was required of him, which he kept Hertha in the Bundesliga, to which obviously he was, very pleased with himself about. But whether they then looked again and maybe looked at something more of a longer term project. Some of their signings to me, certainly this season, have looked a bit strange. But having said that, and having spoke briefly about Schalke, it was actually one of the signings from Schalke today that did most of the damage in the shape of Suat Serdar, who bagged himself 2 goals alongside another Davy Tontin and Malida. I think he's a Frenchman who's come in from I'm not sure exactly where he's come from, to be frankly honest. But there are a couple of signings that look useful. But John, do you think they just need a bit more of direction with regards to their transfer policy, and B, maybe looking at refreshing things with regards to the head coach? Because I'm not sure, for me personally, Dardai is the right man for the job.
Yeah, I would agree with both those things. I think it's all well and good spending money. You've got to spend it in good areas. Having said that, Suat Serdar is an absolutely brilliant player. I loved him at Schalke, and it was just sad to see him sort of languishing in that team by the end. So, yeah, good to see him playing well off the mark and making Hertha better than the sum of their parts, or the parts of their sum. I don't even know how it goes around with them at the moment. Not being a fan of Dardai either. I think what they probably need is some sort of top-down reorganization where they decide what it is as a club that they that they are trying to do, what their overall strategy is going to be. Are they going to be a club that spends money? In which case, sort of what sort of style of football are they thinking of playing? Who's the best coach they can get to bring that about? What do they do in terms of director of football? Because again, it's all well and good just bringing in good players in scare quotes. You need to have some kind of direction in terms of what it is that you're trying to do as a club in terms of play style and stuff like that. So those are the big sort of questions I have with Hertha. And I think modern football now, you can't really get away with just sort of bringing in big players or good players, unless you're Manchester United, of course. Eventually it works. I know that you're a Manchester United fan, Rory, so that was a cheap shot, I'm afraid. Sorry.
That's fine. Well, as you've been so kind to join us, John. I completely agree with some of the signings, like just to throw them out with regards to Hertha. Jovetic, Kevin Prince-Boateng saying, I know Jovetic has had an okay start, to be fair, in Hertha colours. Last season, bringing in Sami Khedira. Obviously, these are names, but are they players that are going to, gel into your team and, make a real impact? Obviously, Khedira's, had half a season, then retired, so he's gone straight away. I'm not entirely sure how long either of the other two players will last at the club. So, interesting one to watch for Hertha, but yeah, obviously they'll be pleased to get off the mark. And Bochum, at home, of course, they'll be stronger. They're going to hold on to games, I think. They look very Arminia Bielefeld-esque from what me and Mark have seen from last season almost. So not the end of the world for them, but they'll certainly want to bounce back when they can. So that's the end of OTB's featured four. So at this point, we have to unfortunately say good evening and goodbye to John. So John, firstly, from me, thank you very much for giving up your time this evening. Obviously, having come from the football match and then joining us to record later on this evening and give us some really good insight, really tactical insight into FC Freiburg. And it's been a pleasure having you on.
Yeah, it's great to be on, and look forward to chatting you in the future. And again, apologies for confusing which team Jamal Musiala is at.
Not a problem. Thanks very much, John. Hope to catch you very soon on a season, on an episode further on the season. Who knows?
Yeah, thanks, take care, guys.
Cheers, John.
Okie doke, right. Fantastic first guest to have on the season of the Bundesliga show. Always like to get new representation, so what a start. Right, we'll very quickly round off the rest of the fixtures then that we've not covered in slightly less detail. So let's start off with probably the next best game. So that was a 3-1 win for Gladbach, which only finished a few hours ago, actually, for them. So Smithy, on the face of it, good win for Gladbach. Obviously, they've got the players that are capable to push them up further up the league. They're only in 11th at the moment, but they've been suffering from injuries. Good win for them, but they obviously need to improve a lot more, don't they?
Yeah, strong win. Obviously, a game you'd probably expect them to be winning, reasonably comfortably. Definitely got the players to be hopefully pushing a lot higher than they are at the moment, and certainly want to be getting into Europe again. I'm not sure, are they in Europe this year again? Are they in Europa League or
Europa
Conference?
Europa League.
Well,
not even sure they are, actually. We'll have to double check.
Yeah.
Overall, good win for them. It's the best, I think it's the best they've played all season, isn't it, really?
What are your thoughts on Bielefeld? Obviously, yet to win a game. Drawn 3 games, though, haven't they? So you'd think, they seem reasonably solid, just maybe not quite getting over the line. Do you think they're relegation contenders this year?
I think they'll just be saved by the fact there's worse teams in the league. Bielefeld look more. No, they do look more of a threat this season going forwards. They survived last year by the skin of their teeth, but again, on a string tight budget. No superstar names. Captain Fantastic Fabian Klos is usually the man for the goals. They've signed well during the summer, so it's obviously their first defeat in 4. You can look at it that way as well. But But yeah, they'll obviously want to bounce back, but it's no disgrace losing away to Gladbach. Moving on, we've got a very entertaining 1-1 draw between Frankfurt and Stuttgart. I watched this live on the day Sunday. My boy Stuttgart getting a last-minute equaliser after going down to 10 men. Frankfurt, again, denied that kind of crucial win that they've been looking for. But the key man came on as a super sub, Kostic, after kind of throwing a bit of a paddy last weekend because he wanted a transfer, basically. So who's going to be happy with that point, Smith?
I thought Frankfurt were unlucky, to be honest. I think Stuttgart probably happier than Frankfurt. I think they had plenty of chances to put the game to bed. We could be sitting there talking about a 2-3-0 win. And yeah, I thought they were unlucky, really, that they should have had that game done and dusted before obviously quite a late equaliser. So yeah, I think Stuttgart on the face of it definitely be a lot happier than Frankfurt there.
Yeah, very much so. Obviously, the shot at the end of the game, Rory hitting the crossbar was a bit of fortune where when Muller kind of hits him, it still stays out. Stuttgart's still kind of struggling with injuries. Very impressed by the debutant Marmoush, who they signed from Wolfsburg. He did a brilliant job actually with limited service and got his goal, which always hard work deserved. So a good point for Stuttgart. Frankfurt still, they'll be desperate for that win soon, especially because all their draws and drop points have been against what you'd call lower teams in the league, and harder games will come. So work to do for Oliver Glasner for sure. Moving on to Hoffenheim, 0, Mainz 2. Mainz high flying at the moment, keep on picking up these wins under Boris Svensson. That's now 3 wins from 4 in the top 4 right now. They're obviously living on a high. I was expecting more from Hoffenheim, to be frankly honest, from that one, Smith. What do you reckon to this? Hoffenheim just not turn up, or Mainz too good?
Yeah, to be honest, Hoffenheim didn't really create much by the looks of it. I thought they were pretty poor. A couple of good finishes from Mainz, though. I think the first one was a bit of a gift. They gave the ball away pretty easily in midfield and seemed to be able to, it was sort of 3-on-3, I think. Good couple of decent finishes, and again another quite comical incident. I think it was second half when there was a player down injured, and the player on the ball goes to turn around and kick it out of play, and he booted it straight at the opposition bench. And I think 7 or 8 of them got up and started running on the pitch, which was a good watch. But interesting game. Solid win for Mainz, but pretty disappointing from Hoffenheim, I think.
Yeah, for all their good play at the moment, the points aren't actually coming on the board for Hoffenheim. Say similar-ish to last season, but they've certainly been more encouraging. Mainz, who knows how far they can go this season. They've been superb, playing some great football. Burkhardt, under-21 Germany captain, looks like a bit of a player. Very smart finish, like you said, for the first goal, and a good counter to finish off the game, 2-0. Moving on to table toppers. Wolfsburg, very routine win, shall we say, over struggling Fürth. They struggled throughout the game. They held on for most of it, and they had a couple of chances at the end. Like I think it was the substitute Abiyama who had an overhead kick in the 85th minute, which is obviously a brilliant save by Castells, because if you don't stay sharp during the game, then obviously you can drop points like that. And then they broke late on, and Wout Weghorst was able to do the damage at the end. What do you reckon to Wolfsburg, Smith? Are they going to actually mount a genuine title challenge this year?
I'd hope so. I think they're. If I was to choose a team to follow, it would be Wolfsburg. For myself, I don't know. I've always seemed to gravitate towards Wolfsburg in the Bundesliga. But now again, they're impressive. Obviously, I think probably expected to win that game. Home side created a few chances, but just weren't really clinical enough. Main man, probably my favourite player in the Bundesliga, Weghorst, puts away the penalty at the end. Quite a sloppy challenge to give it away, which is unfortunate. But there you go. No, hopefully if they can sustain, I think it's just about sustaining it. We've seen people try to challenge Bayern before and can maybe only do it for half a season or 3/4 of the way and fall away. Really strong start. Let's hope they can be there at the end.
Very much agreed. And the last game of the weekend was a stalemate, 0-0 between Union and Augsburg. I think it's fair to say that Augsburg would be most pleased with that point, Smith.
Yeah. To be honest, looking at it, it wasn't that bad a game. There was a ridiculous amount of shots. I think there was 35 shots in the game.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was quite surprised it actually was 0-0 after watching the highlights. But, both keepers very busy. So really, really good saves.
Yeah.
I think Union hit the woodwork 3, maybe 4 times. So, it's pretty unlucky, not to actually get a goal and get the win. But yeah, actually quite an entertaining game for a 0-0, which, to be honest, looking at the scores, you don't see many 0-0s in the Bundesliga. So
very rarely there's a boring 0-0 in the Bundesliga anyway. But yeah,
exactly.
Union, unlucky. Augsburg will be thankful to get themselves another precious point as they see Fürth go below them in the table now. So they're in 17th, but still ultimately struggling to put the ball in the back of the net. So that is pretty much a nice roundup of everything. Obviously, we're taking a little bit more time as we've had such a brilliant time with chatting to John this evening. Very quickly, we'll just summarize or go through the hero and zero of the week. Based on the face of it and based on the importance of the performance and the win, hero of the week goes to Süddar of Hertha Berlin. Bags himself a brace in obviously their first win and first point of the season. Could be a crucial player for Hertha this season. So Süddar, well earned hero of the week. And then the zero, we've already spoken about him. Florian Kainz of FC Cologne. His team 1-0 up, not cruising in the game, of course. They were struggling still, but getting sent off in that fashion, ruins that team dynamic, ruins the start of the season that he'd been having because he'd been brilliant. I just put him in my fantasy team, which
stinker.
Which is going to happen. So that's not going to help me in our over the bar fantasy league. Florian Kainz, zero of the week. So that is everything for this week. So just as per usual, if you haven't checked out Over the Bar already, here's our Twitter at the bottom, at Over the Bar FB. Make sure to check out the website as well. That's where all the main articles are released. So www.otbfootball.net. I've just done one on the Bundesliga top 10 transfers to watch out for this season. So go check that out as well. And of course, watch out for the YouTube channel, which if you're watching, then you're in the right place. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. Obviously, we've got shows coming out twice a week with the Bundesliga Show, regularly on Thursday with Runa for the fantasy tips, and of course, match week reviews every Monday with as many guests as we can get, like the brilliant John. So that's it for this evening. Smithy, thank you very much for your assistance coming in to help in Mark's absence. I'm sure we'll see you again later on in the season.
I'm sure you will. Pleasure. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you on Thursday. Cheers.